Welcome back to 1% Weekly. In this week's episode, I want to talk about some big changes going on in the car industry. I also want to talk about the opportunities and challenges in the world of internet domain names. And in my final chat with our tax expert Jeff Lerma, we're going to touch on the whole area of transferring wealth to the next generation in the most tax efficient way. When he spoke at the Elite Investor Summit back in 2015, America's top demographic analyst, Harry Dent, said that we were at a crossroads in the automotive industry. He argued that because of our aging population, we'd actually reached a peak in the number of cars that would be sold in any given year, and that he expected to see a steady decline from 2016 onwards. How prescient that was, because what we're seeing now is far less attractive sales figures from the major car manufacturers and evidence of a bit of a slowdown in the world's automotive market. US car sales fell 3.6% in 2017 and are forecast to fall further this year. The Chinese market is even slowing down, with a slight growth probably predicted for 2018 versus a 13% growth last year. There's also some pressure on selling prices, which could reduce profits of manufacturers at a time when they need to start investing in major new technologies like electric vehicles and driverless cars. It's also going to be a key year for Tesla, because in the past they've done relatively low volume models that sell at very high prices. But since they introduced their Model 3 car, that's based on taking electric cars into the mass market. But their production is all over the place. It's shambolic. They need a Henry Ford to come and show them what a production line looks like. So if they can't get their act together in 2018, they're probably going to be overtaken by somebody like Nissan, who've got the next generation of their Leaf model coming out, which is again an affordable, decent range electric vehicle. Higher taxes on new diesel cars in the UK have absolutely hammered sales. They're down 16% in 2017 and probably more so this year. It's going to feel like a crime to buy a diesel engine car. So they're very much killing off that end of the market. And again, I've said this before, but with the whole thing with so-called green electric cars is, where's the energy coming from that generates the electricity that powers the car? If we all had solar panels on our roofs that were enough to feed the car's energy, that's fine, but the reality is a lot of it's going to be coming from coal, oil, nuclear power stations, etc. But let's not let the truth spoil a good story, So particularly if you're invested into motor manufacturers, you might want to think about your long-term strategy here, because it looks to me like whether it's manufacturers or some of the big dealers and traders, their time has peaked, and we're at a new point in the cycle where it's perhaps going to be not such a powerful story going forward. This might be the time to get out of any investments related to the automotive industry. Have you ever stopped to think about internet domain names? The first domain name was symbolics.com, actually a company my wife Daphne worked for, and they registered that in 1985, which seems prehistoric by internet standards. But since then, every possible conceivable name you could imagine, .com, has been registered. And what's happening now is that people who want a domain name are effectively being forced to buy it on the second user market from brokers, often at massively inflated prices. There was a survey done recently about most of the kind of single words in the Oxford English Dictionary. I think there's about 107,000 or something, and 104,000 of them, .com, had been registered. So the chances are you're not going to find something that isn't already registered. unless you come up with some really wacky kind of name. But some of the figures being achieved for these domain names are quite impressive. I mean, back in 2010, Mark Zuckerberg paid $8.5 million for FB.com. A couple of years earlier, porn.com, I suppose you might imagine that would be a popular one, went for $9.5 million. In 2012, privatejet.com fetched $30 million. And the most expensive of all was insurance.com, which went for $35.6 million. Now recently, Elon Musk bought X.com. So you kind of wonder how much he must have paid for that, although that information apparently is not in the public domain. So the demand for these niche domain names is increasing hugely, and obviously the supply is limited because they're already registered. So you've really got to try and work out whether you're prepared to pay for that name, or whether you want to just come up with some variant that you could live with. Even something like Ethereum in the massively growing cryptocurrency world, they went for Ethereum.org because they weren't prepared to pay the $10 million being asked for Ethereum.com. That's still effectively an ongoing auction, and the highest bid so far is $6.99 million. So there's an opportunity here. If you can forecast or foresee some upcoming trend, for example, recent ones have been things like blockchain.com or selfie.com. If you can see something coming up like that and register a whole bunch of domains around it, you could then just sit around for a year or two and then suddenly have all of those available to feed into this second user market as people come after you for their niche domain. Other companies have been just buying up entire blocks. There's been some huge transactions recently. GoDaddy paid $35.5 million to acquire Worldwide Media's domain portfolio, and then another $28 million to acquire 200,000 from a company called Marchex in 2015. There's equally a company called Endurance International, which provides cloud services. They paid $45 million to acquire almost 1 million domains in 2014. So there's even a second user market for whole clusters of these domains. So it's something to think about as all the obvious ones have been soaked up. Is there a possibility that you could either dream up the next one at a small level and register them, or possibly start acquiring companies that have already got significant numbers of domains, and again consolidate into a larger entity that could be worth selling on to some of the biggest players. So have a look at the domain name sector. It's a real interesting opportunity, but also potentially you might be thwarted by finding that the name you want is out there, but it's available only at an astronomical price. For my final interview with our tax expert, Jeff Lerma, I've asked him to cover one of the most important areas of the building of long-term multi-generational wealth. And that is, how do you pass on the wealth that you've accumulated, the assets, the businesses, the properties, and so on, to the next generation in the most tax-efficient way? Here's what Jeff had to say. So Jeff, one of the most important areas of this whole planning scenario has got to be having accumulated all your assets through your lifetime. What's the most tax efficient way of passing them on to the next generation so that they can become kind of stewards of multi-generational wealth, which is something that I'm banging the drum about a lot at the moment. So clearly inheritance tax is a big threat to that, because that can take a huge bite out of whatever you want to leave. So tell me a little bit about what can be done from a tax planning perspective to optimize that transfer of wealth to the next generation.
There are still some good opportunities in inheritance tax to help people structure this. it's a bit of a maze. There's a lot of blind alleys to go up, but if you can understand what people want, see what their assets are, sometimes do things in a particular way, potentially using trusts, using companies. Trusts are actually very good. There are some, every thing has its downsides as well, but they are very flexible and they're quite controlling. So they can be very useful. But it's understanding what people want. Sometimes it's part we can insert a charity into the position, which is also really helpful, because sometimes it's a matter of helping people's family, but also people want to leave a legacy and understand that and help people put that in place, because it's. You know, if you look at those sort of very wealthy people, what they want to leave, they're happy for their children to have a certain amount, but actually they want to change the world or make a big difference in their area. And it's not just mega wealthy; it's all the way through. You know, leaving a good amount of assets into something in a charity can actually leave a real sort of positive dent in the world going forward. So it's understanding what people want and putting a structure around that.
But also, I mean, one of the things that strikes me now is that family structures have become so complicated because of, you know, divorce, remarriage, or they're just living with someone they're not married to. They have kids by 3 partners, you know, and then, well, I want them to inherit, but I'm not sure about them, and they might marry some dodgy, you know, drug addict, you know. So how on earth does tax planning cope with this increasing complexity of family structures?
There are ways of dealing with most of these. They're sort of what-if scenarios. The trust is probably the easiest thing. You can have a trustee can have there a letter of wishes, which isn't legally binding, but it gives an idea of what the settlor was thinking of, to actually listen to that and help with that. As far as people divorces, inappropriate marriages, that sort of thing, there are protections that can be put in place, and that's why it's useful to get advice from people that know, so you can actually look at the whole range of solutions. Because if you're sitting and you're not an expert in this area, you're going to come up with something that you think works, but actually there may be so much better solutions. Or you might think, oh, there's nothing I can be done, therefore I'm not going to do anything, and as a result potentially leave the family with a massive liability. Structures are getting complex. What's important is also, if we're doing any tax planning with people, I also have 2 rules about inheritance tax. Never give away anything more that you can't afford to give away, and don't do anything you don't understand. And I've used that in every bit of inheritance tax planning we've ever done, and I use it as a useful guide, because it's important that people do to definitely sort of understand what they're doing.
Because also I think that I've seen some cases where parents have perhaps been over generous, say, in helping kids onto the property ladder, such that they're actually threatening their own financial security during their retirement because they're giving too much away too soon.
Yeah, that is something we've seen, and sometimes we sort of like to act as someone's dad a bit and sort of give them that sort of overall, yeah, I understand why you want to help, and that's a really good motive, but just have you thought about yourself, because that's not going to, that won't be overly good from their point of view. Yeah, there is a massive desire to help people, and that's a really good thing, especially trying to get that sort of next generation millennials onto the property ladder is hard. It's not like buying a house when we used to buy houses when it was all affordable. It's really expensive to buy a house, and that family deposit is a really good thing, or really helpful thing. So but it's understanding how it all fits together and not leaving anybody vulnerable. Because if people are vulnerable, well, I know I would have done a poor job for someone if I've left them vulnerable. I'm not doing that. I won't allow that to happen.
Yeah. But I guess also part of it, and perhaps this relates to your comments about trusts, is that sometimes separating ownership from control, so that you can, the children can potentially become beneficiaries of something, but not actually have the control of the purse strings.
Absolutely, there are some really good ways of doing that, and that's exactly what we hope to achieve. It's nice to have it. You don't want to have the assets potentially at risk because they're used to producing income, but you want to be sure from an investment point of view or from an inheritance tax point of view they're where they need to be. So listen, understand, plan out, explain to people. It's not a quick process. It's not a sort of, oh yeah, pop down 5 minutes, yeah, here's what you... It's much more thought out than that, but it leads to people, and when it's done, especially with inheritance tax, there is a massive feeling of achievement, because you've sorted out your liability. I know we talked to somebody that we might be working with, but there's an ability to reduce the inheritance tax bill by £2.7 million. Now that's fantastic. And it's a bit onerous. There's a few things that need to be done, but it's an amazing opportunity that would really help the family.
Yes, I mean, I once, this is probably slightly tongue-in-cheek, but I once saw inheritance tax described as a voluntary tax, in the sense that it's only those that fail to plan who suddenly find themselves facing a lot.
Absolutely, a voluntary tax paid by people who distrust their relatives more than they dislike the Inland Revenue. Not completely true, but it has a flavour to it. So yeah, no, it's something that we need to. It's a great thing to do, but you need to be sort of take the opportunities, because it can make a big difference.
And finally, on this topic, Jeff, I think in a sense it's very helpful, albeit sometimes a bit challenging, to bring the next generation into the whole discussion and planning process, so they understand that they're about to become the stewards of this family wealth that's been so hard won over the previous generation. Do you find it helps to get them involved? It
absolutely helps, but they've got to be the right sort of person. So it's listening and understanding, and is it right? And sometimes they may be 3 children, and actually one's the right person to get involved. But it's working with them. I would always like to start with the person involved. A while ago, years ago, somebody came to see me, and it was like 3 children, and the mother who's all the assets were, and they were sort of fighting over the mother's assets and making them give away. And it's like, I'm not going to take this work on. The person I really care about, the person I'm trying to help, isn't here. I'm not necessarily sure I trust everybody around her, and I'm not going to get involved in that. And I'm pleased I didn't do that work, because I think that would have led to problem. You've really got to know who we're working for and who we're helping, and that is massively important.
Okay. So really, just to summarise the process of how elite tax planning works, once if somebody gets in touch with us and we think they're a potential candidate, you then jump on the phone with them for 20 minutes or whatever, and see if you think we can help them.
Absolutely. What we've done is we've produced this form together that collates the information we need to have a sensible conversation. We'll have a short telephone call, and then really lead on from there. Sometimes there's bits that you can do to make a difference, sometimes a lot you can do, but we'll understand that from that call. Someone's just completed the questionnaire today that I'm going through, and it's really interesting. You get a really good view about their family and what they want and what's important to them, because I ask people to put that in, and then you can actually really help, really make a difference. And that's what this job's about. It's making a difference. That's why we're doing it, to really help people.
Jeff Lerma, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, some really sage advice there from Jeff. So again, let us know if any of that's relevant to your family circumstances, and we'd be happy to see if we can help. So there we are. Another episode of 1% Weekly comes to an end. I hope you found it useful, particularly some of these in-depth interviews with Jeff Lerma. I will have other guests on the program in the future, as well as obviously sharing the information with you in the other sections on business and on investment. So if you're in the 1% or you're aspiring to join the 1%, keep watching 1% Weekly, and I'll see you next time.